It's great to be here. So nice to see everybody. My goodness. So what a great kind of an honor to get to kick off this conference. I've had a lot of coffee. It looks like everyone else has had coffee, so let's rock and roll. This is The Edge. I want you to think back to the last time you played the game of Battleship. Do you remember it? It's a classic, right? You and your opponent, you both have a game card, and you have ships, and you place them, and you take turns trying to shoot down, sink the ships, right? Okay, well, do you remember when you played that? Maybe 7, 8 years old, something like that? Okay, well, I have news for you. You are actually playing it now in your sales and marketing relationships. However, when you were a kid, at least you had a kind of a set of rules that you played by. Today, in your marketing relationships, think of it, every time you go to a meeting, every time you have a phone call, your client also has their game board, and they've got their ships, and you're trying to land a piece of business, and they're moving them around. Here, I'll give you an example. Very different these days, right? Now that we're in business. Okay, so how about the customer who moves their ships around the whole time, right? Their specs keep changing, their requirements keep changing, everything keeps changing on you, right? They're moving their ships. It's not the same set of rules we played when we were kids. What about, this one's my favorite, what about the client with the ghost ship? That huge piece of business that they keep talking about that they want to give you, but it never seems to materialize, right? Everyone's favorite. You spend a lot of time and energy and effort on this ghost ship client that never seems to materialize. Do you ever just want to say, show me the money, right? You're putting all this time and energy and effort in, but what's the ROI really? What is, where does it end, right? We've got all of our social media, blog posts, all this time and effort. I mean, YouTube, blogging, and, where's the ROI? You're thinking, I've got all this time and money and energy invested. And the process can be really long and time consuming, right? And there's necessarily no end to it. And then you've got to take them out to dinner or lunch. You've got all these things you've got to do. It gets really expensive to nurture these relationships. And the advice of the day is all about relationship marketing. Build relationships with your customers. We're relationship building through social media and meetings and lunches, and everything gets expensive. And then, of course, don't forget all the freebies that everybody wants, right? They want all the extras and all the extra benefits and bonuses, right? So it all adds up, and you're always working on these relationships and give. That's all they're saying these days, give. But the problem is, in relationship building by nature, relationships are emotional and unbalanced and unpredictable. It's difficult, right? Relationship marketing is basically hit or miss. We're trying to make a hit, and we often miss, right? And so what we have to do is we have to stop playing Battleship. We have to stop playing this game of hit or miss with our clients, and we have to start playing something more strategic. I mean, look, marketing is always going to be a game. Marketing and sales is always going to be a game, but if we're going to play a game, we need to be strategic about it. And we need to start playing something strategic, something more like blackjack. So blackjack, it's an easy game, right? Very easy game. It's you against the dealer. And basically you're trying to beat the dealer without going over 21. So let's play a hand. This is fun. All right, so let's say you have a 12. And the dealer always has one card down, one card up. It's called the dealer up card. Let's say the dealer up card is a 4. So what do you want to do? So yell hit if you want to take a card, and yell stand if you want to stand and stay where you are. If you're confident in your 12 and you think you're good, yell stand if you want to stand and hit if you want to hit. Okay. Awesome. So this is how most people play blackjack. They come up to the table and they play it based on emotion, based on instinct. Well, looking at my numbers, I'm feeling good. I think I'm good at this. I'm gonna take a card or I'm not. Okay? They do it based on emotion, based on instinct. But blackjack is actually the one game in the casino that has a real strategy, a proven strategy. This is called a basic strategy chart. And this defines all the different scenarios, all the different possible combinations in blackjack. And there are 4 basic moves: stand, hit, double down, or split. Stand is you stay where you are, hit is you take a card, double down is when you double your bet, and then split is when you get, usually it's when you get 2 of the same card, you can split them and play 2 more hands, okay? So you have 4 major moves. And for every dealer up scenario, there's a suggested ideal move for every scenario. It's called basic strategy. So let's look here. With the dealer up card of 4 and your hand being a 12, basic strategy says to stand. Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to win every time. What it means is that that's the optimal move for that scenario, and your odds are best in that scenario to stand. Now, the majority, our instinct was to hit, but basic strategy said to stand. The reason for this, in this particular scenario, is that the dealer bust rate is 40%. So basic strategy says to stand in this scenario. So it feels a little bit counterintuitive, right? The instinct is to hit. 12 seems low, we should probably hit. But actually the dealer bust rate's 40%. So interesting, completely unemotional decision based on data. So if you use just basic strategy, if all you do is use basic strategy, you can reduce the house edge from 3% to under 1%. So the house edge is basically the casino's guaranteed winnings or guaranteed advantage over you, okay? So you can reduce that from 3% to under 1%. Interesting. But then you can use an additional strategy on top of a basic strategy called card counting. Maybe you've heard of card counting. A lot of us have seen this in the movie Rain Man, when Tom Cruise and his brother, who's on the autistic spectrum, has a special skill with numbers, and they learn how to card count in the casino, and they win a lot of money. Does anyone else think it's a little bit weird that I'm like 5 minutes into my presentation and Tom Cruise has been in twice? Interesting. Me too. Okay, so with card counting, you can actually flip the odds and change to, now you have the 2% advantage if you do basic strategy plus card counting. Maybe you've heard of Jeff Ma and the team from the MIT Blackjack team. It was a team of college students who got together, figured out a strategy for card counting, and won millions at the casinos. The common perception, or actually misperception about card counting is that you have to either be an MIT grad, brilliant, or possibly have special skills in math to be able to card count. But card counting is actually quite simple. What it is card counters are keeping a running score at all times. Every card has a value. So it's either a +1, a 0, or a -1. And what they're doing is they're keeping a focus and a constant count of those cards, and then they're dividing that number, by how many decks are being used to get what's called a true count. So all this is simple math and focus for a true count. They're ultimately tracking the density of high cards to low cards in the deck. And this is what it's telling them. If there are more high cards in the deck due to their calculations, they know that they are at an advantage and that they should be betting up. Look at that, my little T moved around. So they should bet that they need to raise their bet. So if they calculate that there are no more low cards left in the deck, they know that the dealer has the advantage and not to place as high a bet. So they're calculating as they go. But what's interesting here is that the data is what's telling them which move to make. It's not instinct, it's data. So to be successful, we need to really think about less about emotion and more about increasing the odds of success in several ways here by trusting data over instinct. Okay, to listen to the data. I'm going to share some really good stories today. I'm going to show you how people are using data to leverage success. Constantly monitoring the feedback along the way. So card counters are always watching, always focusing. Okay, it's keeping a focus, monitoring that feedback, keeping score and tracking that progress, and then practicing those moves to basically know what works. It's a long game, not a short game. And it's focusing. You don't win every single time, but you learn, the frequency increases, and you learn how to win more often because you're focused in and you're letting the data tell you what move to make. So what we need to do is set the strategy, trust it, and keep score at all times. The data is going to tell you what move to make. And if we don't do this, what happens is mediocrity, right? And mediocrity happens basically when we don't have a plan, right? Just like when we went into the casino and came up to the table like, I'll take a guess, right? It's not repeatable. We don't have a plan. We let emotion drive decisions. And we don't look for insight in the data. That's the critical thing. Generating data is great, but if you're not looking for the insight, if you're not finding insight in that data, then it's pretty worthless. So I'm going to show you some great things. I've got a great story here. This is Daniel Bosomworth from a company called Eye to Eye Travel and Tourism. So he was the head of marketing at Eye to Eye, and they're a travel and tourism company. What they did is kind of the teach and travel types of packages where you go to a foreign country. This one in particular is for Thailand. You go to a foreign country, you teach English for a week, and then you get to, vacation. You might go to a sanctuary, do some, volunteer with wildlife, whatever. But it's got a wonderful kind of Airbnb vibe, definitely brag-worthy type of vacation scenario. And their target was college kids, kids on a gap year, kids in college. They'd go, they'd teach, they'd travel the world, take lots of photos. It was just super fun type of a trip for them. So Eye to Eye got bought by a huge travel and tourism corporation called TUI Group. And they became a tiny little division within TUI. So Dan was charged with leading this division within TUI and growing the program. However, TUI was quite traditional with their marketing methods. They wanted, him to use kind of paid search and brochures, right? If anybody who says they're interested gets mailed a big brochure. Anybody raises their hand, you get a brochure. Kind of like Oprah, you get a brochure and you get a brochure. But the problem is, right, is that, okay, just because they raise their hand doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to buy something. So it's a lot of money invested in all of these different strategies for a pretty mediocre, everyday industry standard 3% conversion rate. So Dan and his team got frustrated with that model, and they decided to start looking at what they did well. He said, what do we do well? And they realized that organic search was actually their best performing strategy or best performing channel. So he had a move to make. He had a decision to make. He could stand and basically keep doing what he was doing, keep his job, right? Keep doing what his company wanted him to do. He could try to provoke a change. He could take a high-risk, high-reward strategy, or he could do kind of two things at once in parallel. Dan chose to double down. What Dan did is Dan fired all of their ad agencies and brought their entire marketing in-house. High risk, high reward. But they decided that they could do it better. And they were willing to take that chance to grow the program. So we basically doubled down, so going all in on a single strategy. And what they did is they developed a quiz. It's called the TEFL quiz. If you're familiar with teaching English abroad, there's a test called TEFL, Teach English as a Foreign Language. And so they started putting out this quiz through organic search. They could find it. And they were asking questions. Now, a quiz, that's a nice idea, right? Maybe everybody who takes the quiz might be interested, but interest isn't enough. Dan determined, and his team, that there's a certain type of person who buys these trips. And so they started asking questions that were very relevant to that type of person. For example, do you like adventurous food? Have you taken the TEFL exam? Right? Have you traveled outside the United States? If you answered yes to those, you're starting to get a lot closer to their ideal person. If you're saying no, then you're probably what they would call a romantic tire kicker. somebody who loves the idea of going on that trip, but who will never actually be the person who buys that type of a trip. So aspiration does not necessarily equal buying intent. So they were trying to get down to their real people with the real buying intent. And one of the things they were able to determine was that people who had taken the TEFL exam were 11 times more likely to complete 3 lead tools. So they had a series of other lead tools beyond the quiz they started to put out, things like filling out forms, material to download, things like that. But if they had completed the TEFL exam, that really started to get down to their ideal audience. So what started to happen was Dan and his team created kind of a grassroots lead scoring technique where people who were making the right kind of answers to the certain questions were moving up the scale, and people who were answering, the opposite direction were going down the other end of the scale. And then there was kind of a middle point in between. And so what started to happen was those ideal customers started to surface. And then by the time it came to make the call, right, the sales call, at that point, the sales calls were more like consultations than cold calls. They had so much information about these people that they were closing the deals left and right because they knew they had the right person, they knew they had the right information, and they were closing deals left and right. But something else happened. So as I mentioned, their target audience was young people. It was college kids. It was people on a gap year. Okay, check. But in putting out this quiz and doing this whole lead scoring scenario, an entirely new category that they had never considered emerged. Mature audiences that were in transitions. People who were leaving a job, empty nesters, divorce, people who were in a different stage of their lives, but who had deep pockets and the willingness to go and do these trips. So fascinating, right? You had this whole category of consumers that they had ignored, they never knew anything about, that were right there. So Dan had a decision to make. What do you do? Does he stand? Does he stay with what he has and focus on the young people and say, we got enough going on, we're going to stay here? Does he try to provoke a different model, a different response? Does he double down, I guess, and just double down on the kids and be done with it? Or does he split? And does he do 2 strategies, basically? Dan chose to split. So he decided to stay the course and focus on the college kids, and then he also created an entirely new strategy based on lifestyle choices and attitudes. Get away from it all. Start fresh. So they did an entirely new strategy. So they were splitting. Focus on the students and focus on this new category as well. So pretty fascinating things happened. In 3 years, he grew the program by 30% and grew their revenue, annual revenue, from $2 million to $6 million. And then Dan left the company. He left for an interesting reason. So what happened was Dan's division grew so quickly that the people at TUI actually said, slow down. We were not planning for this. You've overwhelmed our dev team. We need you guys to kind of take it back a notch. And Dan felt so strongly about what they had developed and what they were able to do that he left and he started his own company called First 10, and now he does these kind of lead scoring scenarios at the highest level for some of the biggest brands. So pretty neat. So moral to Dan's story is to get better leads, you need to keep better score. So you may be wondering how, you heard a bit about my background, you may be wondering how I kind of got down this path as this folding person. Wait, I thought you said she was all about folding, but how did you get into this whole blackjack thing? Well, I'm an entrepreneur. I have a company called Foldfactory, and we manufacture creative formats for direct mail and marketing. We create die lines. We do all sorts of neat things. And we have a YouTube channel. And I've been, for 8 years, I've been shooting a weekly video series called 60-Second Super Cool Fold of the Week. And for 8 years, like, let that sink in, every single week. Good hair days, bad hair day. You know, you just think about it, the camera's on. So, so I'm coming up on my 400th video for Fold of the Week. But we have, thanks. We have a rabid fan base. We're coming up on 2 million YouTube views. We have 20,000 loyal subscribers. As far as relationship marketing goes today, I'm amazing at building relationships. No problem. But we're not killing it then. Like by relationship marketing standards, right? If you build relationships and you'll grow your business. Okay, yeah, don't get me wrong, we're in the black every month, no problem. We make money, but for our stats and what we're doing, we should be killing it. And so I started to wonder, like, for all of this effort and all of this energy and all of this time and all of this money, why, what is it that I'm missing? There are other companies out there that, have almost no social media, don't have a sexy product to promote, and they're making money hand over fist. He looks kind of smug, but so, okay. What are they doing right? What am I doing wrong? And so I started to look beyond my industry. I started to look at other things. I wanted to look at process, because if it's not relationships, then it must be process. There's something else. And so I hired an etiquette consultant for my kids. Kind of long story, but it's a thing. So anyway, I talked to the etiquette consultant and I said, what's the process on etiquette? And she said, it's a series of moves. It's a series of moves, but it's more than just knowing those moves. She said it's knowing that it's not that it's hard. She said it's just knowing when to use those moves. That's what etiquette's about. Same thing with things like fencing or, jujitsu. There are a series of moves, but then you have to know when to use them, when to make those moves. You can do this with anything. Weight loss, right? We all know what we're supposed to eat. And those who write it down and track it and keep score are the ones who have the best result, because it's a process. There's consistency there. Which led me to blackjack, and how there are 4 simple moves, and there's a basic strategy. We talked about basic strategy. There's a basic strategy, and then there are simple moves you can make. And if you apply a strategy and then scorekeeping like a card counter, I started to see the parallels between sales and marketing relationships and blackjack. So it's not just knowing the rules. It's knowing when to use them. And that's what the scorekeeping does. The data tells us exactly what the best next move will be. So you have to set a data-informed plan, trust that plan rather than your gut, keep score, and the data is going to tell us what the best next move will be. So the way to get the edge, okay, is to use these 4 moves: stand, hit, double down, and split. I've been using them already on some of the stories. Stand, hit, double down, and split. And then add a scorekeeping technique. Not necessarily lead scoring, by the way. And I'm going to show you a couple other ways that companies are keeping score. And you combine those key moves with keeping score with data, and that's how you get the edge. So this is Brian Benson of Benson Marketing. And he owned a printing company, a commercial printing company, about a $6 million a year company. They were doing well, really good business. But he wanted to grow. And he wasn't seeing the year-over-year growth that he was expecting. He just wasn't seeing it. And he wanted he just wanted to see that growth. And so he said, what am I going to do? How are we going to, get this kind of explosive growth that we're looking for? So he decided to ask a question to his team. How can we make our customers look like heroes in their organizations? And so what he decided to do is to put out a monthly survey. But it's not the monthly survey that you and I see all the time. It's not the rate us 1 to 5 on our customer service. What would you like us to work on? Those same surveys that we see all the time. It wasn't that kind of tactical survey that provides a tactical response. Instead, they said, What are you struggling with in your organization? And what would make your job easier? Those types of questions. And the answers they were getting were pretty enlightening. Why do outdoor signs take 6 to 12 weeks to create? And branded apparel is killing us. It's powerful insight. So then Brian had a decision to make. I mean, at the time, they weren't creating outdoor signs. They weren't doing branded apparel. They were a printer. They were printing marketing materials. So we had a decision to make. Do you jump into the market as a Me Too? Do you stay where you are and just see if you can help them with some resources? Do you make a big move and get aggressive? So he could stand, hit, double down, or split. And Brian decided to hit. He decided to aggressively get into the market. But he said, I'm going to do the research first. I'm going to hire a research firm, and I'm going to make sure there's a real demand. And I'm going to make sure that there's a real customer need. And then we're going to only get into the market if we can disrupt it. We're not going in as a Me Too. So we made a very aggressive move, a hit. So it means taking an assertive action to provoke a response, okay? So Brian and his team figured out how to make outdoor architectural signage in 2 weeks, not 6 to 12 weeks. So they hit the market aggressively in all of these categories where they were getting the feedback and it made sense to invest. And so what started to happen was they realized they had a lot of different offerings that helped the multifamily real estate market. And so they had a lot of customers already in multifamily real estate, and they started to really form an array of products and offerings for this specific market. And what they did is they kind of flipped the market on its head, the model, basically. Normally in commercial print, it's a sales team and one job at a time coming in and out. He started developing 5-year contracts for all-exclusive, single-source printing for multifamily real estate. So he had people locked in. He didn't even need a sales team because he had these contracts, and he was their 5-year provider. But the other thing that he was doing is he started to keep score. And this is fascinating. He started to provide data and turning that into reports for his customers. So he was doing completely transparent data for his customers. And so he started comparing them to each other and saying, this customer gets their work in, 4 days on average, and this one gets their jobs delivered in 7. And customers were seeing these reports and they started to say, well, why did they get theirs in 4 days? Why do I get mine in 7? And he would say, well, that's because they're using our online web portal to submit their jobs. Would you like to try it? So he was using data and transparency to get his customers into smoother workflows that help them do better business, make more money. It's amazing. Okay, so he was using this data, and it kept him focused on his customers' needs, and it helped his customers save money and to become happier and stickier, so to speak. So then the banking industry comes knocking. Well, gee, what you're doing for the multifamily market, we need all that stuff too. We need window clings and wall signage and brochures and stuff. Do it for us. So Brian had a decision to make. Do we jump into the banking market? That a lot of times the instinct is, we got something great going on. Let's spin it out in a bunch of categories, right? And we'll get huge. But what Brian realized is that there are little intricate details in every workflow and in every industry. And he said those little details that are different for banking versus for multifamily real estate mess up our workflow. And they take time and they cost money. And he said, as we see it, we have 40 huge clients. And we've only hit 7% of the multifamily real estate market. So we've got tremendous opportunity here. So he could stand, hit, double down, or split. And Brian decided to stand and stay in the multifamily market and refuse any additional work. That's a hard thing to do when you have millions and millions of dollars of expensive printing equipment and all the capabilities in the world. To turn down huge clients in other industries and keep a laser focus takes a tremendous amount of self-control, right, and of focus. So he was confident in his position and committed to a singular focus. Right now, Brian's company is on pace to hit $50 million a year in revenue in 2018. They have 155 employees, almost zero turnover, and almost zero turnover of clients. They're amazing. So sometimes your most powerful win is deep rather than wide. Focused in rather than doing that kind of instinctive, let's spin it out. And it was the right thing to do because that's what the data said. And I have one more quick story for everybody. This is Christopher Walkie. He's a marketer and also a champagne lover. His hobby was studying champagne. And he's really into just everything that loved the experience of champagne. He had a website called Glass of Bubbly where he posted interesting stuff about champagne, just as a hobby. He met a guy from a company called Rise Global, a guy named Toby Beresford. Rise Global is a success tracking network. They create leaderboards. And basically they're comparing people by social media and cloud score. And people or companies can be compared on these leaderboards. And so he said, what if I created a leaderboard of champagne houses? I wonder if they would interact. I mean, Chris was somebody who had no relationships with any of these champagne companies. So he really was like, I wonder if they'll do anything if I do this. I want more. So he has a choice to make. Is he going to stand, hit, double down, or split? So Chris wants to change his situation. He wants to make an aggressive move. So Chris decides to hit. So he decides to create 100 champagne houses into a leaderboard and launches it. And this leaderboard, I've zoomed in for you here, it shows, who goes down and who goes up. He's keeping score, he's tracking them. And then he sent them each a tweet that says, hey, come see how you're doing on our leaderboard. Come see where your champagne house ranks on our leaderboard. You went up, you went down. Traffic to his website went up 600% overnight. The champagne houses started communicating with him. They said, well, what is this you're doing? Can we write for you? Do you need some sponsors? Like, how can we get involved? And previously, this was a kind of an industry that just nobody was really focused on. Nobody had ever tried to put them together and to do something with them. So he had this opportunity, and he had these companies that were interested in working with him. So we got a little bit of funding, started a magazine called Glass of Bubbly that went out by mail to subscribers and also was in the finest hotels in the UK. They started having live events for tastings and competitions. They were really starting to kind of fuel the lifestyle. Social media picked up. People started taking pictures of themselves with their champagne and with their Glass of Bubbly magazine. Glass of Bubbly today is on its 4th year of the magazine. They're tracking 200 champagne houses on their leaderboard. You can go see it on their site. They have a weekly newsletter. They have international live events. They have sponsors and fans, 40,000 Twitter followers, 1,500 people in LinkedIn groups. They've got, all sorts of Instagram followers as well. They're doing incredibly well. All because he made that action, right? Took action. You'll never know where you stand unless you make a move. And I think oftentimes, and this happens in blackjack as well, is we choose inaction over action. Even the best blackjack players who know the right strategy to make oftentimes still hold back because they don't trust it. And so sometimes we don't have the important conversation, we don't make that move. And it's the move that's important. To keep moving, we have to make that move to know where we stand. So you may be wondering, okay, Trish, well, you now learned all this interesting stuff. How has it affected your business? Has it done anything for Foldfactory? Actually, it has. Thanks for asking. So our focus, as I mentioned, was always on B2B, right? The kind of the higher end of direct mail and marketing. So, that's what we always focused on. We've always been there. But we took a cue from Daniel Bosomworth and started to look at what else is working. It's kind of interesting. This is fascinating to me because all along we've had a Pinterest page, and because we felt like we kind of had to. It was a necessary evil, whatever. We'll just throw some stuff on Pinterest. YouTube's really our channel. We do all of these other things, but we'll keep a little Pinterest page. And we found that doing nothing on our Pinterest page, we were getting 60,000 views, 115,000 impressions per month, standing still. Crafters were posting our stuff and sharing. And we didn't know it all along. It feels insane to say this and admit this to everybody, but truthfully, this was going on. So our growth is in B2C, and we've been doing focus groups and meeting with crafty moms and bloggers and all this other stuff, and realizing that there's this huge category and a need for creative cut products for crafts. So the data is telling us to split. So we're going to keep our B2B side of Foldfactory.com, and in a few months, we're launching our new B2C company, arm of the company called Foldfactory Craft. Crazy. So we have to really think about sales and marketing. We have to rethink the way that we're doing this. It can't be about emotion. It can't be about, gut instinct. It can't be hit or miss. There's never been a better time to be strategic and think like a blackjack player, and to go in and focus in like a card counter and get that edge that really tips the odds into your favor. But most people don't know that you can use those moves of stand, hit, double down, and split combined with scorekeeping to really get that edge that changes everything. So I need you to start keeping score. I need you to look at the data. Look for insight in the data. It will be there. Trust it. And remember, if you're going to win more business and get better leads, always keep score.